What was that, Lane? Seriously.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we're going to break out the flamethrower today, folks. Just everybody get ready. If anybody doesn't want to hear bad news, go do something else, honestly, because we're going to do bad news today, because today was nothing but bad news. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, a former 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former staff member at Ole Miss. And that was the worst half of offense, absolutely the worst half of offense I have seen from an Ole Miss team since Ed Orgeron was the coach. That first half was atrocious. It was terrible. And it allowed Kentucky to set the tempo, set the tone. They had time of possession. I mentioned in my video at the halftime that Ole Miss was in a little bit of trouble if they allowed this to continue and they could lose the game. And I talked about this during the week, that Kentucky's defense was the second best defense that Ole Miss was going to play, that Ole Miss was going to see other than Georgia. And their offense had weapons that could make you hurt as well in Barry and Brown and Dane Key, which had big grabs in this game over and over again. Brock Vandegrift had a very good day for Kentucky. Mark Stoops absolutely worked Lane Kiffin today. Absolutely, wasn't even close. And the offense in the first half was terrible. Terrible. Like Joe Milton, Tennessee, terrible. Everything was 40 yards downfield. It's my Joe Milton joke. If you want him to complete a pass for 40 yards, he can complete a pass for 40 yards. If you want him to complete a pass for 10 yards, he can complete a pass for 40 yards. That was Ole Miss's offense in the first half. It was terrible. No quick game. Ole Miss ran the ball in true running plays 4 times in the first half. Even with Henry Parrish and everything going on, 4 times. That is all they ran the football. And because that, the tone and tempo was set for Mark Stoops and this Kentucky Wildcats offense. And I talked all week long, every single day, that if you want him muck up the game, he was going to do it to where, I said it at the time, it would be 16-13 with Kentucky having the ball going down to win the game. That is what Kentucky want. That is what Kentucky got. And credit to Mark Stoops. Him and his staff and his players, they executed flawlessly. Congratulations. That was absolutely fantastic to see for people that were watching Kentucky. After they almost got it done against Georgia, to go down to Oxford, an 15-point underdog by kickoff, and pull it off at the end, absolutely amazing. And the other thing, the penalties in the first half. This was not a football game if it wasn't for those penalties. The fact that they have not cleaned it up over 3 weeks, although they cleaned it up in the second half, that kind of makes you wonder. But them not cleaning up those penalties over 3 weeks, we said that would burn you in SEC play. Well, that burns you. Everybody got burnt. That's the way that happens. And when you look at Ole Miss offensively, they called that game arrogantly. It was so arrogantly called to where you felt entitled to the yards you can get. And we saw this a couple of times last year to where the offensive calls kind of got in that pattern to where there was no quick game, no running game. It was all deep passes down the field. And that is something that happened last season. Well, this year it happened and they couldn't pull it out at the end. They missed a field goal at the end. The Hail Mary heave to Caden Prieskorn, which that was his only catch of the day, by the way. That was the only chance that Caden Prieskorn had to touch the football, was in a Hail Mary at the end of the game. Everything that we said about this Ole Miss team over the last 8 months, absolutely true. Absolutely true. But this week, Lane Kiffin said the first 4 games did not prepare him and prepare the team for SEC play. That is what they said. It did not prepare the team for SEC play. And whenever you think about that, it kind of blows your mind a little bit. Because of what can happen. And because of this is an absolute disaster. You think over and over again how this season can go, but was it the kinder, gentler spring and everything, hardly practicing all of that? Was that supposed to get your players ready for SEC football? Was it the kinder, gentler fall? Was that supposed to get your players ready for fall camp? Especially since you didn't think that the fall camp or the preseason non-conference schedule was going to get your players ready for SEC play. And what we saw was the worst first half that I've seen from an Ole Miss team in probably 15 to 20 years. Since Orgeron, since probably that Northwestern State game, was the last time that I saw an offensive half that was that poorly run. The first half was awesome. Great game plan by Mark Stoops. He had his best corner out of the game. It didn't matter. He used schemes to get people on the line of scrimmage, to flush Jackson Dart and to get after him, to frustrate the offensive line at times. On defense, they max protected 7 and 8 man protections to protect Brock Vandegrift, who, like we said all week, he was a Georgia transfer with talent. He can make throws. This was a disaster game. There's really no way to spin this in any other way. It was an absolute abject disaster game. Let's look at the stats real quick. All right. Bring this up real quick so I can see them. Brock Vandegrift, who has not thrown for more than 140 yards the entire season, threw for 243 yards. A lot of drives and a lot of yardage he was able to get was due to the jump ball, the duck and chuck ball on 4th and 7 at the end of the game that Barry and Brown caught. And also the numerous penalties that Ole Miss got during the first half that kept drives going that allowed Kentucky, I think, to score the first touchdown. Those penalties legitimately cost Ole Miss the football game. If you look at that, it is absolutely nuts. Jackson Dart was 18 to 27, 261 yards. Henry Parrish, 13 carries for 62 yards. And much of that was in the second half because they did not run the ball in the first half. Receiving wise, Trey Harris, 11 for 176. He's the best player in college football, but he fumbled this game as well in the red zone. That is a situation where it could have cost Ole Miss the game as well. I think the lack of a quick game was probably more to blame than anything else. Defensively, this was a coming out party for Sontaran Perkins. This was, the defensive stats are not on here. Multiple sacks in the game. Ole Miss ended up with only 14 first downs for the game. Think about that. 14 first downs. 1 for 10 on third down. You know why? There was no quick game. In fact, they were 2 for 2 on 4th down, and they scored the touchdown on 4th down using the quick game. Kentucky 4-16. They could not do very well on third down. In the first half, they converted some 4th downs. Ended up with a total of 336 yards. Ole Miss had 356 yards for the game, or 353 yards for the game. Listen, the defense gave up 20 points. The defense should be allowed to give up 20 points with this offense. This offense was atrocious today. It was absolutely crazy. Kentucky had 93 yards rushing, averaged 2 yards per carry. That's fine. Ole Miss only had 92 yards, averaged 3.2 yards per carry, but they didn't even try to run the ball. Penalty-wise, Ole Miss had 8 for 53. A lot of those kept drives alive. Kentucky kept time of possession 40 to 20 as well. It was atrocious. There was really no way that you can look at this any other direction than it was atrocious. It was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was a game where all of the Ole Miss fans had bought in. Everybody had drank the Kool-Aid. Rat poison salesmen like me and other people, everybody said this. If you looked at Vegas, the line against Kentucky was the smallest line of the year, but even it opened at 18 to 20 points a game. This Ole Miss team had everybody believing. And this game was a disaster. They were not ready to play. Mark Stoops absolutely worked Lane Kiffin. All right, when we come back, we are going to look at the talk a little bit more about this game, and we're going to take your comments as well in the chat. Be sure in the chat to put where you're commenting from as well. With Robinhood Gold, you do not need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.5 APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of the high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 per month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up for robinhoodgold.com or robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rates may change, and gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Also, a new partner of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast is College Corner, your one-stop shop for all things Ole Miss. Game day today, the stripe out looked absolutely fantastic. The only thing that we can say is good about today is how the field looked, how the crowd looked, how the crowd acted. Congratulations, you did a fantastic job. Scott's going to get a bunch of Realtree Galaxy tumblers in the future, and they got more stuff on the way. Whether you're gearing up for football, basketball, or baseball, College Corner has you covered. They're located on Sisk Avenue, right across from Chick-fil-A. Getting to the store is a breeze with plenty of parking. For those of you out of state, no worries. Visit collegecornerstore.com, where they turn around orders lightning fast. Trust me, this just isn't a pitch. College Corner is where I get all of my Rebel gear. So visit collegecornerstore.com or stop by College Corner today. So, all right, so that was absolutely horrible. That is something nobody wants to do again. That was absolutely, abjectly terrible. And let's see what your comments are in the chat. I figure over the next 18 minutes, we are going to let you go a little bit as well. We'll see. We're going to go back to the top a little bit. So if I don't get to you, we can do that. But there's a lot of people in the chat right now. Whoever is calling the offense needs to be sent to Alcatraz. That was one of the most unbearable games of Ole Miss I've watched play in the last few years. I think that is honestly going back to Ed Orgeron's game against Northwestern State in Oxford. That was the worst game to watch. That was something that Lane Kiffin has not done since he has been at Ole Miss. But because of what's going on, everybody is thinking about that as well. Ryan says, horrible play calls, 4th and 7. How do you give up a deep shot? Worst loss Ole Miss has had in the last 5 years. This might be worse loss than any loss that Ole Miss has had since Orgeron. I'm serious. Well, no, I take that back. This might be the worst loss since Memphis and Hugh Freeze in 2015. I could do the 4th and 25 and play that game, but this is probably the worst thing since that Memphis game as well. Doesn't matter. The wide receiver cannot be single covered on 4th and 7 in any way. And you're absolutely right. He shouldn't be. You cannot give up that deep ball. Let's see. Kentucky fan unassisted. MK, Kentucky is just better. They're not just better. That was the worst game that Ole Miss has played in 10 years. Ole Miss is better. Great game plan for Mark Stoops. They executed flawlessly. Congratulations for that, but they are not better than this Ole Miss team. Ole Miss is spending upwards of like $13-14 million in the transfer portal, which, hey, that's getting to danger time now as well. Bryce says, damn, I don't think y'all even make the playoffs. Maybe not. Not if they come in. That's kind of soft. That was bad. They just looked soft. They have this big offensive line. They have this great defensive line, and they looked soft in that game. Kentucky out-physicaled them at the line of scrimmage. They won the defensive line versus O-line battle. They had the better defensive line in the game, and they were able to be functional offensively. So whenever you put those two together, they were able to eke out a win in that 4th and 7. That was a fantastic call, and honestly, Mark Stoops should be commended. And everybody that is upset that he punted the ball against Georgia, him going for a 4th and 7 on his own 20-yard line, that is something. Michael Specs, Lane still has a better social media game than Stoops. Yeah, who cares? You can't do that and have a good social media game. It's bad. Lane got absolutely worked in this game. He has to wear this. This was all him. This Ole Miss team was not ready to play. Why was this Ole Miss team not ready to play? He said during the week he was worried because he didn't think the non-conference schedule prepared his team for the SEC slate, and he hoped practice did. But practice was a kinder, gentler fall camp, a kinder, gentler spring training. How would that prepare anything for this? And Mark Stoops came in and bulldozed Ole Miss in this game. Lane got completely outcoached by Mark Stoops. It wasn't even close. And because of that, Ole Miss, they did not look good. Their game plan looked arrogant, just absolutely arrogant. Ryan, this was the easiest SEC game on the schedule. We are cooked. This was not the easiest SEC game on the schedule. This was the second hardest defense that Ole Miss is going to face. Now, the South Carolina game, you better worry about the South Carolina game right now. If what happens today shows up in South Carolina, with the way they are worked up, they are going to work you over. Absolutely going to work you over. And Georgia and all the stuff that could have happened is on the verge of not happening. All of what everybody wants to have happen can happen. But now you have to win that Georgia game. That is why this is so difficult. We talked on this all season, this whole off season, playoffs or bust. It was playoffs or bust. And I said coming into this season, I was going to handle this team differently on account that the players are getting paid and because it is playoffs or bust. You don't get these freebies. This was atrocious. This was unforgivable. Cash, the real saying, I don't even watch Jordan versus Bam anymore. Heck, I do. Heck, I'm going to watch all of that. Nick Greenlee, you're taking a shot in the dark. He said, I told you Ole Miss wasn't that good, my guy. You're just taking a shot because, hey, you had an opinion Ole Miss lost a game, but odds are you have no idea what you're talking about. Eli Dawson, multiple drop catches, multiple blown up plays, multiple bad play calls. Yeah, it was unbelievable. It was the worst football game that Ole Miss has played in probably 15 years. They were not ready to play. They were not ready for the opening of SEC season in the most important season in their school's history. They weren't. And you can't tell me they were. They were down 10-7 against Kentucky, and their offense looked atrocious. There's no way to describe that. And it was because of arrogance. It was that arrogant play calling that was their undoing. And giving up a 4th and 7 bomb, that was like giving up, was it 4th and 23 in the national title game? Kirby did to Tua. That's what it was like. It's like you cannot do that. Now, he might have pushed off, but whatever. Freaking terrible defensive game. The defense, we'll worry about the defense later. Defense only gave up 330 yards and 20 points. The offense is what was atrocious. When Jackson Dart is coming across as a voting leader for the Heisman Trophy, and he puts in that performance, and they just duck and chuck the whole first half, and they don't use any of the quick game and the weapons that they have. I do not know where Ulysses Bentley came in. Henry Parrish got injured. Ulysses Bentley doesn't go into the game. Ole Miss in their use of weapons was at best interesting. Mark Walsh, terrible offensive play calling. It was the worst. It was the worst I've seen since probably 2006. Like Seth Adams playing quarterback, that time frame. That type of offense is what we saw. This was supposed to be a Heisman Trophy candidate. Everybody said so. He was one of the voting favorites for it. And Ole Miss got greedy. Let the guy work. Let the guy work. You had a bunch of throws underneath. You had a bunch of stuff. Play the quick game. Play the quick game. You know, every completion does not have to be a 35-yard pass. It just doesn't. Worst Ole Miss loss in the past 5 years? That's probably the worst Ole Miss loss since 2015. It was probably the Memphis loss in 2015 is what I would compare that to. You're a delusional rebel and Dave. I don't know what that means. Oh, instead of worrying about Freeze, Twitter should have been coaching. He should have been coaching. Okay. Yeah. Freeze, what Freeze did is terrible. And also what this loss did, I bet Deuce Knight commits next week to Auburn. If Auburn wins this game, I bet you Deuce Knight commits. There's layers to what this loss is. Dart was drunk as hell. Something was going on. He did not look right. We abandoned the run for most of the game, which absolutely killed us. Finally had success in the second half because we started running it, but Parrish was clearly hurt. Why the F was Bentley not in? Excuse me. There goes that clean rating. I do not know. Rashad Amos. Lack of depth for the sake of lack of depth is at best problematic. Ole Miss has some soul searching offensively to do. O-line was pathetic, played soft the whole game. They did. They absolutely did. Anyway, we're going to continue your questions in just a moment. Right now, I do want to let you know what's going on, but stick with us. Right after this, we'll have more of your comments. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. In the place to bet on what Ole Miss is going to do next, who the freak knows what's going to happen. The way Ole Miss looked today, they should be an underdog in South Carolina, and South Carolina is not particularly good. But if Ole Miss has that in their system, they have a lower floor than I thought they did. That today was absolutely uncalled for, and it can't ever happen again. And we'll see tomorrow what FanDuel says about the opening of that South Carolina line. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, like, hey, take the under in this game, you can check out the latest stats, view the latest play-by-play, and so much more in the same place where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so we'll continue in the comment section with what's going on. That was an absolutely atrocious game. There's nobody that can defend that. Anybody that tries to take anything positive out of that game is lying to you. There's nothing positive. It was a horrible game. The only thing that you can argue with in that game is that because of the 12-team playoff, there is still hope and still everything to play for. But Ole Miss has got to get a lot better really quickly because that first half was awful. It was absolutely awful to the point where I was like having flashbacks to like Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis, and Seth Adams and Mike Wallace on the outside being a really good player, but not getting utilized like Trey Harris was. Ole Miss dropping passes. Only one target, I think, to Juice Wells. Everything else went to Trey Harris. It was so predictable. And that just absolutely can't happen as well. Lace Siren said the O-line was pathetic. They played soft the whole game. They never played together. Y'all blame the coaches. It's soft approach. I get it. The players weren't in sync at all. The practice and everything, this did not obviously get them ready to go for SEC play. The only thing that you can go off of is what you saw, and they were not prepared in the first half. That first half was absolutely atrocious and terrible. And there's really nobody that can excuse that. Anybody that tries to stick up for spring practice and fall camp at this point, I'm not listening to any of that. Because if you were worried about non-conference not preparing you for SEC play and you were relying on fall practice and you go with this kinder, gentler approach, this is what happens. This is why everybody has the fall practice that they're supposed to do. Common sense, first time I've seen Dart. I thought he was supposed to be good. He was. That was terrible. That was awful. Somebody got in everybody's ear and they talked about how Kentucky was the second easiest team they were going to play. And it was like, that's not true. And because of that, they just weren't ready to go. Becky, come on now. Jason Mathis, we're not playing Furman. Why are we throwing for percentage home run balls and getting behind the chains? Were there any offensive adjustments at the half? Where were our tight ends? Ghost? That's the thing. There was no quick game in this thing. This was the throwback to the worst of what the offense was a year ago. And this time, the defense was enough to keep you out of the end zone. And you have a couple of drop passes. You get behind the chains. You turn the ball over. And the next thing you know, it's 17-13 with 4 minutes to go in the game, a 4th and 7 on your own 25-yard line. And you have one-on-one coverage with Isaiah Hamilton and Barry Brown. And I talked all week that Dane Key and Barry Brown is the type of players that can make you hurt. They will let you know that they are there. And they did. Absolutely. That was a horrible kick at the end of the game. I have concerns now. After the Tulane game a year ago, I thought we had somebody that was pretty nails. That was a bad kick. He did not hit that ball well at all. Freddie Ruger says didn't run the ball the entire first half. Pass, quarterback keeper, pass. And the quarterback keeper was a scramble. It was a situation to where Ole Miss offensively just it was arrogant offense. It wasn't even lazy. It was arrogant. It was Ole Miss thinking that they should move the ball because they just can. This offense is unstoppable. And I get confidence. I understand that. And from what we've seen, it was probably earned. But you have to go into working that you knew this game was going to step up this week. And they obviously did not do that. I don't know what's going on. Let's see. We need the play action and tough rushing yards. Yeah, Ulysses Bentley needs to play. Rashad Amos needs to play. It can't just be Henry Parrish. It can't just be Henry Parrish. And this is an example where you saw why. Matt Jones was okay in this game, but he was not a threat at all. It just kind of is what it is. Kentucky was picking on Trey Amos. And I have no problem mentioning the players' names whenever stuff like this happens because they're getting money. They're getting paid. They're professional athletes. Trey Amos was getting picked on. He was being too handsy in the first half, and he was a problem. Once that got situated, the defense got a whole lot better, and you thought they were going to be good. But when Ole Miss got the 17-13 lead, that was the most conservative offense that I've ever seen. They didn't even try. It was just like, hey, let's get out of here and win this thing. They're not going to be able to score. It was crazy. Get your popcorn ready. Willie Bean and Carolina's D-line will eat Jackson Dart alive. Yeah. Get ready. South Carolina is going to be a cauldron. It's going to be a cauldron. Do you remember when Lane Kiffin tweeted out the Juice Wells thing with the 2001 thing? Do you remember that? That happened. Get ready. South Carolina is fired up about this game, and nobody should take that lightly. And nobody can just say, hey, that's an automatic win at this point. Because, like I said, this was the worst performance that I've seen in the last 15 years at Ole Miss. It was terrible. It was atrocious. Jay Smith says, I don't think we necessarily have to beat Georgia. Yes, all paths to hosting a playoff game is beating Georgia. At 10-2, the schedule comes into play, and there's an excuse for you to end up in the Citrus Bowl. This was a must-win game, and they weren't ready to play. That is why I'm upset. All of the talent that's on this team, and they all exist. It's all real. It's not fake hype. But every other team has good players too. So if you're not preparing, they will eat you alive. Let's see. Why are the Rebels not using pre-scoring? The quick game stuff was bad. Kentucky is not better. I will say this tongue pot. Do you think Kentucky can go 8-4 this year? That would require them to go 5-3 in the SEC? I think that's a possibility now. I mean, if they play Tennessee, they have to get Tennessee. They've already had Georgia. They've already had South Carolina. They're 1-2. So it's going to require them probably to win. I'd have to look at their schedule, but I like what Mark Stoops did today. He won that game the only way that he could win that game. And he completely coached Lane Kiffin under the table. Kentucky fans should be very happy with what they have in Mark Stoops. Anyway, we've run out of time a little bit as well, so I hope everybody's all right. Tomorrow we're going to have the reaction roundtable. More flamethrower. Like I said, this was a putrid game, and that, I mean, Ole Miss fans should be justifiably upset by what they saw today. Period. Anyway, take care. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Reaction roundtable, and we'll have what we learned on Monday. Take care. Hotty Toddy.